Hello, and welcome to episode 4 of my Let's Talk About Pathfinder series. This episode is subtitled, Let's Talk About Alchemists, which should tell you a few things about where you are. But if it's unclear, let me break it down for you. I intend to make one video per class on every single class in Pathfinder First Edition, all 40 of them. Although, I might skip the medium and maybe also the shifter. The point of these videos is to teach you, the viewer, how to be an absolute expert on every aspect of the class you are playing, so that you have no problems picking up the game, building a character, and slinging dice with the experts. My name is Brother Patrick, and if you're confused about where you are, or you'd like to hear my credentials, I recommend you watch the first video in this series. If you want to learn how to play Pathfinder 1.0, or you need help building a character from scratch, episode 1.2 and episodes 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3 will help with that. Also, short disclaimer, this series is about Pathfinder First Edition, not Second Edition. So, if you are looking to get into 2E, that's great. Congrats, you've picked a great game. That's not today's article. Series. Whatever. Now, once again, I'm going to be throwing a lot of information at you, so feel free to pause the video, rewind, write stuff down, whatever you need. This information is covered in hundreds of pages on the core rulebook, and not everybody has access to a first edition core rulebook. For one thing, it's out of print, and also not everybody learns better through reading than through listening. Alchemy. Like I said, today's episode is about the Alchemist, how to build one, what to do in combat, what to do when you're out of combat. Alchemists are, by the traditional standards of Vancian casting, and Pathfinder in general, weird as all get out. Their method of casting spells is unique to them and the Investigator. They have 3 different incredibly powerful class features, each of which you have to fully build around to make them function at peak efficiency. So why play an Alchemist? Well, simply put, versatility. Alchemists are capable of a ton of neat tricks. They can be skill-focused characters, or melee monsters, or stealth specialists, or even battlefield control. What is going on with my hair today? They get decent saving throws, numerous powerful damage buffs to various abilities like throw and alchemical splash weapons, and an incredibly versatile list of discoveries that opens up a ton of interesting build paths. They even have ways of buffing allies while circumventing the action economy altogether, which cannot be overstated. Before we get into a breakdown of what each class feature does, I'm going to go over the primary roles an alchemist can fulfill in combat, which will define the rest of the episode. First and foremost, an alchemist can make for an excellent support build. With the ability to pass out potions and extracts and even alchemical items like weapon blanches, a support alchemist is going to have a lot to do in combat even when not attacking. There's also the Grenadier build, which is all about, as it sounds, putting out bombs. The Alchemist primary class feature can be altered by altered to get around damage resistances and immunities, and you can even deliver some powerful debuffs with bombs, to say nothing of the truly absurd amounts of direct damage you can just throw at people as a Grenadier. The third way to build an Alchemist is the Mutant, a mainly melee-focused build that uses a combination of the Mutagen class feature and the spectacular list of buffs on the Alchemist formula list to become an outright menace when they get their full attack action off. If you've ever wanted to play as a super mutant from Fallout, here's your chance. Fourth up is the Poisoner. Poisoners are difficult to build for a number of reasons in Pathfinder, chief among them being the fact that a lot of monsters are immune to poisons, or incredibly resistant to them thanks to high fortitude saves. But, like everything in this game, there's a build for that, and it's nasty. Lastly, I want to bring up the option for Alchemist to be a healer. Not only does it fit the aesthetic, but it's also remarkably effective. Do note that you will likely be leaning into multiple roles in your build, even if you do have a primary direction. A mutant alchemist is likely to have some buffs to share with the party. A poisoner is likely to have a couple of ranks in heal as well. It's a matter of what choices you make at character creation and how you choose to spend your action economy in combat. Now, before we get into your options themselves, I want to talk about the absolute basics of the Alchemist, the chassis, the static class features, and the big picture choices like what race should I play and what ability scores should I prioritize. So, from the top, the chassis. The Alchemist gets a D8 hit die, which is overwhelmingly the most common hit die in the game. If you plan on wading into melee, you will 100% need to improve upon this with either a decent constitution score or the toughness feat, or potentially both. If you don't expect to be in melee combat too often, you can rest on the laurels of a D8 hit die just fine. Also the most common in the game is the Alchemist base attack bonus, which is medium progression or the 3/4 progression. Again, not great, but salvageable. Luckily for most alchemists, bombs hit at touch AC, which scales negatively with challenge rating starting at mid-levels, so your grenadiers will have no problem throwing bombs into a skirmish. There's skills per level, which the Alchemist gets 4 of. Now, never fear, we are an intelligence-based class. A properly built Alchemist should expect to receive somewhere between 8 and 12 skill ranks per level. And don't forget, your bonus increases are retroactive. So if you increase your intelligence modifier, you get an extra amount of skill ranks equal to your level to allocate. As a quick aside, a couple of skills you'll want to keep topped off. Craft Alchemy, of course, since you might as well, and you also get a monstrous bonus to it already. Heal, if you feel like leaning into it, but you can skip it if someone else is working towards it. Perception, of course, it's the most rolled skill in the game. Survival, again, if you need it, it's on your class skill list. And your 2 knowledges, Arcana and Nature, both of which are common and which you will excel at because of your high intelligence. Things you can probably ignore: Spellcraft, unless you're making potions. Use Magic Device, unless you take the trait at character creation that swaps your charisma for your intelligence for that skill only. It's called Pragmatic Activator. And Disable Device in Sleight of Hand, unless your party is sorely lacking a rogue. Saving throws. You have a bad will save, which will be how the GM keeps you out of fights. Make no mistake. If you build a combat monster, your GM will attempt to keep you locked down to balance things from their end, as they rightly should. However, this game can be an arms race, so if you want to get to use all your neat class features, consider shoring up your will saves with the Iron Will feat and a reasonable wisdom score. Lastly, our weapon and armor proficiencies. We get light armor and simple weapons, which are both fine, I guess. But do note that your extracts are not arcane spellcasting, and are therefore not subject to spell failure chances. So, if you'd like to pick up a medium armor proficiency feat, there's nothing stopping you from doing so. Okay, let's talk about the class features. The very first thing we get is Throw Anything, which grants us both the option of throwing improvised weapons without penalty, and the ability to add our intelligence modifier to damage rolls with all splash weapons, including bombs. Now this is very, very good, because bombs deal minimum damage to creatures in the splash radius, so having a modifier of any kind is going to be critical to your ability to deal damage in an area, which is a primary function of the Grenadier. Speaking of bombs, our next class feature is Alchemy, because we're an alchemist and we do alchemical things. Primarily, Alchemy gives you a bonus on craft alchemy checks made to craft alchemical items, which is neat, kinda. But it also lets you identify potions using that skill, which is also kinda neat. More importantly, though, is the 3 subclass features that Alchemy grant you: extracts, bombs, and mutagens. If you'll recall back to our breakdown of the class's primary roles in combat, you'll also recall that the first 3 roles an Alchemist can take are Support, Grenadier, and Mutant, and that was on purpose. More on that in a minute. Extracts, let's talk about extracts. You get spellcasting, but not really. You don't have a caster level, they're temporary, and they only affect you to start out with. But you do have a really robust list of buffs on your formula list, and you can craft extracts of up to 6th level, which is twice the level that Brew Potion allows. Do note that if you'd like to give out your extracts to your allies, you will need the Infusion Discovery. More on that in a moment as well. Bombs. You get your level plus your intelligence modifier bombs per day. They do 1d6 every odd level, so 1d6 at first, 2d6 at third, 3d6 at fifth, and so on. They also add your intelligence modifier to both the direct damage and your splash damage, thanks to the Throw Anything class feature. Base bombs always deal fire damage, and always allow for a reflex save for half if you're in the splash radius, but not if you're targeted by the attack itself. Now, with a properly kitted out selection of discoveries, your bombs can be obnoxiously powerful. Important to note, you can't Vital Strike with bombs, you can't Critical Hit with bombs, and they take a standard action to throw, all of which will limit your damage output significantly for a while. More on the standard action thing when we start talking about discoveries. And then we get to the mutagen, powerhouse of the Alchemist. They take an hour to brew, they last 10 minutes per level, and you can only have one of them at a time. However, when you drink the Fang Ding, you get a +4 alchemical bonus to a physical ability score, a +2 natural armor bonus, and a -2 penalty to the corresponding mental score. So if you buff up your strength, you take a -2 to int. If you buff up your dex, you take a -2 to wisdom. And if you buff up your con, you take a -2 to charisma. Now this is amazing for 3 reasons. First, it's an alchemical bonus, meaning it stacks with your belts and your spells. Second, natural armor is hard to come by. And third, you get to pick which score you want to buff when you brew it, which is incredibly versatile. If you are not planning on wading into melee combat, keeping a dex buff for the extra AC or a con boost for the extra hit points can and will save your life. Just be careful when boosting decks that you don't penalize your will saves too much. Next up on the class feature list is Brew Potion, which lets you mix up more permanent extracts at the cost of time and gold. Now don't discount this feature. It can be super useful. Note that extracts fizzle out after 24 hours. So having potions on hand that you really only need for situational uses can save you those extract slots. Also, if you mix if you mix your potion-based discoveries with the Crafty Alchemist, you can get a lot of mileage from this ability. Alright, so that's all the first level class features. Beginning at second level, we will pick up a +2 to all saves versus poisons, which will eventually scale into poison immunity at 10th level. Just remember, alcohol is a poison, and if you want to drink your sorrows away, you have to do it before 10th level. You also get your first discovery. Discoveries are the make or break feature of this class. Every alchemist needs to pick them very smartly, you can't replace them once you've chosen them, and it can dramatically shift the direction of what you do in combat. If you're focusing on your mutagen, you're a titanic claw-slashing monster. If you're focusing on your bombs, now you're dropping nuclear damage every 5 or 6 times per round. The other second level class feature is poison use, which is, to let you use poisons. Congrats! You do what the thing that you want to be doing. At third level, we pick up Swift Alchemy, which halves the time to craft items, and lets us apply poisons as a move action, both of which are incidental but useful if those are the things we want to be doing. The next class feature we get at 6th level, which is Swift Poisoning. For a poisoner, this is a key class feature that puts the alchemist a level above other poison-based classes. A 6th level alchemist can apply poison to a weapon as a swift action, which lets you still take a full attack action with your poisoned sword that turn. Since poisons get more potent the more you deliver, this can and will be the debilitating class feature that keeps your opponent in the ground. At 14th level, you get Persistent Mutagen, which increases your mutagen class feature from 10 minutes per level to 1 hour per level. So congrats, you have it all day. And then lastly, you get Instant Alchemy, which I'm not even going to talk about because it's an 18th level class feature, and if you're playing an 18th level character, what are you doing watching this video? You already know how to play an alchemist. You've been playing it for 18 levels. Alright, let's talk about ability scores. Your strength score is going to be critically important for you if and only if you are playing a mutant. For everybody else, dump it as low as you feel comfortable. I do want to highlight something though. If you're up close and personal with your sword and your claws and your mutagen, you should try to keep your strength at least a 16 or an 18, preferably at first level. And again, that is only for mutants. For your dexterity score, you'll need an AC, especially if you're a frontliner with a D8 hit die, but more important, for the Grenadier, your dexterity governs your to-hit bonus, which will determine if you can actually deal damage with this turn, or if you wasted the whole turn. Same rules, you want a 16 at least, or comfortably an 18 to start out with. Constitution should never be below 14. I will die on this hill. Or more accurately, I won't die on this hill because my Constitution is at least a 14 and I'll survive whatever blows you throw at me. Never ever dump Constitution below 14. Very, very rarely are you going to be okay playing a character that has a sub 14 Constitution. Maybe if you're like a backline fullcaster or an archer, but even then that's like a maybe. Intelligence is our casting stat. It governs our uses per day and damages for bombs, as well as our ranks per level when it comes to skills. If you're not playing a mutant, you will want this sky high. Mutants can get away with maybe a 14 to start with, but you'll want to beef it up as soon as you can. Wisdom is a tertiary stat, but should never be your dump stat unless you're playing a paladin. More on that in, the next video. You need it for those will saves. Don't put it below 10, and hover it around 12 if you can afford it. And lastly, charisma is useless for us entirely. Feel free to get rid of it altogether. You don't need it. Alright, let's talk about races. Humans, as always, excellent choice. The floating +2 to anything makes it universally useful, and if you don't need the extra feat, keep in mind there is an alternate racial trait that you can take that trades away the extra feat for an additional +2 to a second stat. If you want to start the game with an 18 dex and an 18 int, that's how to do it. For similar reasons, the half-elf is also excellent. You get a free feat at first level, but it has to be a skill focus or a weapon proficiency. The weapon proficiency is especially useful for a poisoner, because you can take exotic weapon proficiency in, and I'm sorry if I butcher the pronunciation of this weapon, the Sant Kang, which is the poisoner's favorite knife. Bombardiers will love the half-orc favored class bonus, which grants plus half your level to bomb damage. Elves make good support alchemists, but suffer heavily in melee because of the con penalty. Base tieflings are arguably better than either half-orcs or elves. They don't get the con penalty, they get a charisma penalty, but they still get the half-orc favored class bonus. I also want to highlight the ratfolk. The size bonus grants you a +1 to armor, attack rolls, and stealth. I'm sorry, +4 to stealth. The strength penalty is there, but all good stats where you want them, and a relevant favored class bonus, +1/6 of a new discovery. You could do much worse than playing a ratfolk. Alright, let's talk about the base build. You've got your class features, your ability scores, and your race picked out. Discoveries. I'm not going to go over every single one, but I'm going to go over a few that are good for each build type. So starting with the support alchemist, we're going to go in order. First and foremost, you want to take infusion at first level, or second level rather. Infusion lets you hand out your extracts to your allies. Remember earlier when I said the support alchemist can really cheese the action economy? Here's how. Let's say you're in a surprise round. The whole team has one standard action to set up the first attack. Do you, A, cast haste on the team and then save your blur or resist energy for the next round, or B, instruct the fighter to drink his haste extract, then remind the wizard that you gave him a blur extract, and then remind the rogue to take his resist energy extract, and then still have your own standard action to drink a mutagen or throw a bomb. You see what I'm getting at here? It's not really cheese because it's just stealing actions from your allies, but I mean, it's less actions for you to use in combat. It gets even better when you get to 8th level and pick up the Combine Extracts discovery, which lets you mix two buffs together. Now when your fighter drinks haste, he can also drink Enlarge Person with the same action. Talk about efficiency. Support alchemists might also love the Cognitogen, which lets you boost mental stats at the expense of physical, the way the mutagen does the inverse. I also want to highlight the Divine Inks into Living Pigment line, which can do really interesting things if you're creative, especially if you're not using your bombs every day. Lastly, I want to highlight the Spontaneous Healing into Healing Touch 1-2 combo, which lets you heal yourselves and your allies a little more efficiently than just dumping potions down their throats. This can be very helpful in combat when things get dire. More on that when we get to feats. Alright, let's switch gears. Grenadiers. Obviously, there's a ton of bomb-based discoveries, some of which are very versatile. Bear in mind that the ones marked with an asterisk can only be applied to one bomb at a time. You cannot blind and confuse simultaneously. Which bomb-altering discoveries you take directly coincides with what kind of monsters you expect to be fighting all the time. But I do want to highlight Confusion Bomb, which confuses enemies, Cursed Bomb, which curses enemies, and Dispelling Bomb, which can dispel spells. When it comes to the non-bomb altering discoveries, there are two you'll want for sure. Precise Bombs, which lets you exclude your friends when you throw bombs into melee, which is huge, and Fast Bombs, which lets you throw as many bombs per round as you have attacks. Do note that this does stack with both two-weapon fighting and Rapid Shot, which lets you put out, when you get it at 8th level, an insane 5 attacks per round, all of which hit at touch AC the moment you pick it up. You may outdamage the Barbarian. Lastly, on the Grenadier, I want to touch on Explosive Missile, which lets you turn your bombs into arrows or crossbow bolts to be fired from a weapon. Why would we want this? Well, range. You're not hitting at touch AC anymore, but this will do things to your bomb's range that makes getting hit by an attack in combat a laughably unlikely possibility. Alright, switching gears to the mutant build now, your second level discovery will almost certainly be Feral Mutagen. You get a bite attack and 2 claw attacks, all at primary. These will almost certainly be more accurate than iterative attacks made with a manufactured weapon, and you won't even get a third iterative attack until 15th level, so you're already outpacing every other alchemist on the battlefield. Remember, you can buy extra natural attacks with things like the, oh god, what is it, the Scorpion Tail Whip, the one that lets you, like, Flesh Warped Scorpion's Tail, that's it. There's also the Helm of the Mammoth Lord, which gives you a gore attack with your new horns. At mid-level, it won't be unreasonable for you to have 5 or 6 primary natural attacks at once. This combos really well with the Vivisectionist archetype, more on that later on. You will want to take the Greater Mutagen and Grand Mutagen at 12th and 16th levels, respectively. These combo well with your physical ability scores to truly insane levels. A properly spec'd out mutant can expect his strength score to hit 36 by the end of the campaign just with these discoveries. Don't forget the natural armor bonus too. Your AC will thank you. I want to take this aside to remind you that when you use your mutagens, it penalizes your corresponding mental scores. So if you take Grand Mutagen at 16th level, you will be taking a -2 to all 3 mental stats. So, if you are a high-level alchemist, make sure you pick up a Vest of Stable Mutations. It is a 20,000 gold item. It removes all the penalties from any type of mutagen. Okay, moving on to the Poisoner. I'm going to link the Long Farewell guide in the show notes. This is the relatively well-established guide on how to poison people in Pathfinder First Edition, but there are a few things that you should absolutely know about before you decide to play a Poisoner. The first is the Sticky Poisons discovery, conveniently a 6th level discovery, which is of course when we get Swift Poisoning. Now, when you poison a weapon with a single dose of poison, it lasts for a number of attacks equal to your intelligence modifier. Congratulations! You can now use a swift action and stab for the next 2 rounds. This also combos really well with the Master Alchemist feat, which does the same thing but for crafting poisons. So to reiterate, Master Alchemist and Sticky Poisons makes it so that every time you craft a dose of a poison, you actually get a number of successful attacks of a weapon equal to your intelligence modifier squared. Other great discoveries for poisoners are Celestial Poisons, which allows you to affect undead and evil outsiders with your poisons, and Elemental Destabilizers, which does the same thing but for elementals. Creatures that are immune to poisons are the bane of a poisoner's life, so these 2 discoveries will be massive for you. I do also want to point out Designer Poisons, which, if you are fighting and expecting to fight really specific types of enemies, this can be really useful for you. I won't bring up any specific discoveries for healer alchemists because I already mentioned spontaneous healing and healing touch in the support section, but a support alchemist is already a great base for a healer on its own, so keep an eye on that. Alright, before we get into the extracts list and what each extracts of each level you should prepare, I want to point out that mixing in any given extract takes 1 minute of work. What this means is, if a weird niche problem comes up and you suddenly find yourself desperately needing, for example, an extract of water breathing, you'll be happy you left a slot open this morning. I recommend, in fact, leaving 1 slot open at every single level, except for maybe the highest level you can prepare. You never know when you'll encounter something bizarre, and the versatility is absolutely endless. I also want to point out specifically that the Combine Extracts discovery cheeses the action economy in ways that will make wizards jealous. So let's talk about first level extracts. Fun things you'll like in no particular order. Anticipate Peril, because initiative determines who lives and who dies. Enlarge Person, because your marshal needs it and will thank you for it, and so will you if you're a mutant. Targeted Bomb Admixture, which adds your int mod to bomb damage a second time at the cost of the splash damage, for when you absolutely need to lock down one specific bad guy. And then Tears to Wine, which grants you a whopping +10 bonus to wisdom and intelligence-based skill checks. No more invisibility. Second level, Blur will give enemies a mischance when attacking you, although we get its superior cousin Displacement at the next 1 extra spell level. Invisibility is great if you plan on being the support alchemist. Remember, using extracts does not remove your invisibility. Ask your DM if throwing a bomb at a grid intersection counts as making an attack, because if your GM rules that you don't break invisibility when you don't target a creature, you can throw a lot of damage without breaking invisibility. Full Pouch is also great if you plan on crafting alchemical items. It duplicates 1 item you make and increases its save DC to near acceptable levels. Alchemical Allocation might be the best second level extract you can get. It effectively grants you free refills on any potion you hold, including the really powerful ones that the GM gave you assuming you'd only be able to use once. Bark Skin is an amazing natural armor buff, and it stacks with the mutagen bonuses because it's an enhancement bonus. And then finally, Resist Energy, which makes you harder to kill. Always a benefit. Alright, third level extracts. Displacement gives you a 50% miss chance. That's every single attack that strikes you has a 50-50 chance of missing. Better than any amount of armor class. I also want to mention Paragon Surge, which is half-elf only, but gives you a free feat and boosts some of your useful stats. Bombers will love Bouncing Bomb Admixture. A lot of the best bomb abilities work on direct damage, and this lets you hit 2 creatures at once in the same round with the same bomb. Channel Vigor is just better haste. Orchid's Drop is hours per level, heals you, and grants you a saving throw buff that will keep you alive when you get targeted by Feeble Mind. And then Non-Detection, of course, for when you want to be sneaky. Fourth level extracts. You cannot go wrong with freedom of movement. Stone Skin gives you respectable damage reduction. Caustic Blood is a great defensive spell. It doesn't allow for spell resistance, and it does surprisingly good damage for a 4th level buff spell. Purify Body is basically minor heal 2 spell levels early. Greater Invisibility will potentially proc sneak attack, poisons, or bombs without worrying about the crackback. And then Universal Formula, my favorite spell on your list. You should have one prepared at all times. It's a 4th level spell slot for any 3rd or below spell on your list. 5th level extracts, the Shining Star is spell resistance, which nets you an unreasonably powerful defensive buff. Sending is also great for utility, but I want to point out the dark horse of 5th level extracts, Delayed Consumption. Delayed Consumption functions great as contingency. You'll want to have it as often as possible, and it functions as any 4th level it functions by pouring any 4th level extract into it, which means you can universal formula your delayed consumption. Which means, basically, when you want it, you can have any spell on your extract list of 3rd level or below. That's kind of insane. And then lastly, 6th level is the only real star is, to be honest, heal. 1 extract of heal will single-handedly put you back into a fight. Heals all conditions, heals 150 hit points. It's heal. That's its name. Alright, moving on. Archetypes. Alchemist gets a lot of them. Some of them are weird. Many of them stack with each other. I'm going to point out a few standouts for each of the different builds and talk about why they're standouts. Starting with the support Alchemist, I want to bring up the Ectoplasmic Master first. With the Ectoplasmic Servant Discovery, you get these summon monster spells on your extract list, which opens up not just a lot of utility, but also a lot of action economy. Why bother fighting when you can get someone else to fight for you? Ectoplasm Master also gets the Necromancy spells from the Wizard spell list, which means you could do double duty as an undead crafter. Also worth noting is that it stacks with the Homunculist, which gets you a Homunculus Familiar, which you can apply archetypes to as a familiar. You can really end up with a lot of extra bodies on the battlefield. Just remember, many GMs really don't want to keep track of the extra monsters. So talk with your GM before throwing a bunch of extra, bodies onto the battlefield. I'm also personally super partial to the Mad Scientist Alchemist, which isn't necessarily good per se, but it is really funny. Once per spell level you can cast, or prepare rather, you get a random spell of the next level spells you can prepare. So you spend a 3rd level extract and get a random 4th level spell effect out of it. That's really funny. Moving on to the Grenadier, there's the Grenadier archetype. Hey, look at that. You can do some really nasty things with ranged weapons in the alchemical weapon ability, like applying sneezing powder to an arrow. Alternatively, if you want to have just the most amount of fun, you could play a gun chemist and shoot people in the head with exploding bullets. I don't think I need to explain that any further, to be honest. Do note that the gun chemist also stacks with the mind chemist, which is where the cognitogen comes from, which will net you some really insane DC increases to your bombs. Shoot somebody, force to save DC versus confusion or blinding or whatever condition. And the Winged Marauder, which is goblin only, but nets you a fully leveled flying animal companion that you can ride around on and chuck grenades from. If you're not playing in confined spaces like dungeons, you could do a lot worse. Alright, moving on to the Mutant. We're going to talk about the Beast Morph. Lots of versatility, some insane magical bonuses, and it stacks with my other favorite mutant archetype, the Vivisectionist. You'll be dealing a lot of d6's worth of damage. You could seriously just tear an enemy clean in twain, especially since you don't really need bombs when you're a melee fighter. The Poisoner really only gets 2 good archetypes, the Eldritch Poisoner and the Toxicant. Now, the Eldritch Poisoner nets us a scaling damage poison that can really pack a punch. You can do some nasty things with your discoveries, you get a little bit of sneak attack, and even your crafted poisons can be really powerful if you're being clever about it. The Toxicant is, in my opinion, a little weaker, but you get to daze enemies on a failed save, and it crucially stacks with the Vivisectionist again, so you're not useless when fighting enemies that are immune to poison. There's really only one build if you want to play a healer alchemist, and it's a doozy. Keep up with me here. You'll want to take the Chirurgeon archetype, which can use infusions on cure spells and gains skill focus heal as a bonus feat, which will make more sense when you get to feats and talk about the incredible Healer's Hands signature skill heal combination. You will also want the Wasteland Blightbreaker archetype, which lets you poke people with healing and deliver break enchantment with a touch. Powerful stuff. And then third, you'll want to at least consider adding the Sacrament Alchemist archetype, which is powerful, but a little complicated. You get a floating domain as a mutagen, which can be incredibly powerful, but you'll also need to know which domain to pick. And you'll have to worship a deity, a specific deity. And that's the archetypes. I want to bring up one prestige class as a multi-class option, and that's the Brewkeeper. It applies some really nasty debuffs to your bombs, metamagic feats to your extracts, and explicitly allows you to turn extracts into potions or oils, which is a huge game changer. For example, the Accelerated Drinker feat lets you drink potions as a move action, and this lets extracts count as potions. You see where I'm coming with this? Alternatively, you can use Alchemical Allocation on 5th level spell slots, which effectively just grants you free spell recall. All you have to do is worship the god of drunken revelry, which, to be fair, is a sacrifice for some of you. Alright, feats. Let's move on to feats. Extra Discovery is almost always useful, Improved Initiative is almost always useful, Iron Will and Toughness are almost always useful. Extra Bombs will help Grenadiers get past level 8 when they get to Fast Bombs. Concentrated Splash doesn't work on bombs, but all other alchemical items will benefit from it, so it's especially useful for a Grenadier with the Grenadier archetype, and thus the alchemical weapon ability. Speaking of Grenadiers, you guys are going to want the point-blank shot, precise shot, rapid shot sort of train. You'll also probably want 2-weapon fighting unless you're playing a gun chemist. It's a lot of feats, but it's super worth it for the extra attacks. If you're going for the mutant build, you will want power attack, you will want combat reflexes, you will especially want toughness. Seriously, you need toughness. I cannot stress that highly enough. The Poisoner will benefit from a number of useful feats. I personally prefer Pernicious Stab over Treacherous Toxin, because it doesn't cap out at high level. Toxicological Timing and Improved Toxicological Timing are mandatory for certain mundane poisons with a nasty onset time. If you have a built-in class feature with its own DC, such as the Arcanotoxin from the the Eldritch Poisoner, you'll love the Ability Focus feat. Most Poisoners could really benefit from Extra Discovery. Lastly, let's talk about healers. I promised we would get there. There's a guide to healing with skill checks. I will link it in the notes, but basically, if you take Signature Skill Heal, Healer's Hands, and Incredible Healer, you can treat deadly wounds as a full round action, and in doing so, heal some really ridiculous amounts of damage. If I'm reading the combinations right, at 15th level, one full round action can heal a creature of 120 hit points per day. 15 times per day. How would you like to have 15 castings of heal every day? That's unbelievable. Alright, that's feats. Let's talk about equipment, and I promised we'll be done after that. We're not going to go over the big 6, because we did that in the video on how to build a character. Instead, I want to point out a few of my favorite items for the Alchemist. We talked about the Vest of Stable Mutations. There's Poisoner's Gloves, which combos beautifully with any option that grants you a familiar, such as the Homunculus archetype. A hybridization funnel does funny things to our alchemical items. A sipping jacket will let you take advantage of the potions you craft, and especially combos well with the Brewkeeper, which again allows your extracts to count as potions. And then there's the virulent weapon quality, which is required for any poisoner. And that, after 33 minutes, is the Alchemist. Tune in next time when I tackle the Anti-Paladin, which hopefully will be a much shorter video. If you like this video, do not worry about like and subscribe nonsense. Just support the Archives of Nethys on Patreon. Those guys are my heroes. I'll put a link in the show notes. If you have questions, comments, or concerns, you can reach me by commenting on this video or by messaging brother-Patrick on Reddit. Thank you once more. Be well, my friends.